So hello friends. So today I'll be talking on this 28th update in COVID, which is looking at whether there is any good severity models to predict the outcome in COVID. So when you look at this topic, you need to really look into all the epidemiological studies that have been published to try to make sense out of all the data that comes to see and look at what are the predictors that really indicate to us and influence the outcome in patients with COVID. So I'll just take you through some epidemiological studies and certain predictive factors that have been identified to determine the outcome of COVID patients. So most of the studies, as you would see, have come in earlier April, and then I will take you through some of the recent studies. So this was the study that came in JAMA on 22nd April. So again, looking into comorbidities and outcome amongst 5,700 patients hospitalized with COVID in the New York area. So this study was an observational study that looked into the 12 hospitals in the New York City, Long Island, and Westchester, looking into the patterns of these patients, try to understand what are the factors that predict the outcome. So the study was done between 1st March 2020 to 4th April 2020. So the outcomes they looked in the study was the patients needing mechanical ventilation, renal replacement therapy, and the death. So they looked at 2,634 patients with COVID, and 2,634 patients were looked for the outcome, and the total number of patients they followed was 5,700 patients. So the median age of the patient in this study was 63 years, and interquartile range was 52 to 75, and 39.7% are females. So as you would see worldwide data, males seem to be more commonly affected. So if you are looking at a predictive model, so males also tend to get more affected, and even outcome commensurately will be little more, the deaths would be little more worse in this gender. So in this particular study, they looked at the comorbidities. As you see, hypertension was the largest comorbidity, accounting for 56.6%. And now we are in September, so we have increasingly seen that obesity is an important risk factor, and patients who are obese with COVID, they seem to have a much worse outcome than non-obese patients. So this is something which we have been seeing from last 5 to 6 months. And diabetes is the third commonest comorbidities that they found, 33.8%. And this, when you compare with the Chinese study that came in 9th March 2020 in Lancet, there also the pattern was similar. Hypertension remains the commonest comorbidities, followed by diabetes, and coronary artery disease accounted for 8% of the patients with COVID. And when you look at the symptoms, fever accounted for 30.7%. And surprisingly, when you look at the older study, tachypnea seems to be a very common symptom, accounting for 76%. But I'm not sure whether this is a pattern we're currently seeing in September, because tachypnea, we are not seeing increasing work of breathing or tachypnea in the patients that we have been seeing. And dyspnea is generally a late presentation, but if you look at this JAMA article, in the US study, 55% accounted for dyspnea. But here we don't find the subjective breathlessness until very late in the disease, where obviously the need for HFNC or NIV tends to prevail during that situation. So this, when you compare with this Chinese trial or Chinese article that came in Lancet, fever again they are accounted for most commonest. So we would somehow subscribe to fever as being a commoner symptom even now, 98%, and 76% had cough and 55% had dyspnea even in the Chinese study. So this is the sort of a symptomology that tends to occur in COVID. So in this particular study, post-discharge follow-up was done for 4.4 days. Interquartile range was 2.2 to 9.3 days. They looked at readmission rates. 2.2% of the patients required readmission, and the median duration for readmission was 3 days. So after they got discharged. So this pattern we are seeing now increasingly. So this, as you see, this study was done in April, but now looking at September month, which is 4 to 5 months after April, we are seeing a similar trend of readmissions following discharge of COVID patients getting admitted with maybe prevailing breathlessness or worsening of shortness of breath or worsening of cough symptoms. So the median duration for obtaining PCR test in April in US study was 15.4 hours. So now let's look at the ICU data. So 14.2% of the patients required ICU admission, and the median age of patients needing ICU admission was 68 years, and 33.5% were females, which means more males tend to get admitted into ICU. So as I said, so we are talking about risk stratification. So if you look at this data, so it is pretty clear that males tend to get more affected and males tend to get more sicker. Obese patients tend to get more sicker. And commonest symptomology appears to be fever, but when they go to ICU, obviously dyspnea accounts for 55%. And 12.2% of the patients in this study needed intubation and mechanical ventilation. And this was a April study that came in JAMA. The mortality that happened in these intubated was 88.1% in the US data. But when you compare with the Chinese data, only 4% got intubated and mechanically ventilated. And this is another Chinese study which came in NEJM in early February, which is in the early part of the pandemic. 14% needed mechanical ventilation. So 3.2% needed renal replacement therapy, and the mortality, the overall ICU mortality was 21%. So for all the listeners, when you so because we are always looking at case fatality rate, but it is about time to start looking at our own ICU mortality. But when you look at the global data, ICU mortality tends to hover between 20 to 25%. So that is the ballpark figure in which the ICU mortality tends to hover. And so this is a very staggering sort of a finding in this particular study, which came in April, that 88.1% of the patients who got intubated died. And when they compared this with a Chinese study, which came in Lancet in 9th March, 97% of the patients who were mechanically ventilated died. And three patients were initiated on ECMO, and all three of them had died. So this particular study also looked into age-wise distribution of mortality. So as you see, less than 20 years, the mortality is zero. And so this is a very important aspect. So males had a higher mortality at every 10-year interval. So with every 10 year or with every passage of a decade, the mortality sequentially tended to increase, and it was more correlative in the male gender. And 88.1% was the mortality in mechanically ventilated. So they stratified with the age. So when you look at the age group of 18 to 64, the mortality in ventilated patient was 76.4. But more than 65 years, the mortality was 97.2, which means to say elderly people who get intubated and mechanically ventilated, you can quote this figure if you're talking or counseling to a patient about intubated outcome of intubated patients, because even in my ICU, currently as I'm giving this talk, I have some two patients who are intubated mechanical ventilated who are 70, more than 70 years. So which easily accounts to mortality of around 98. So this is something which one could utilize during counseling to make family understand that the severity of this COVID, especially in an elderly patients when they get intubated, mortality in the best of hospitals worldwide, which in US can be about 97 to 98%. So which is a staggering sort of a percentage. And someone who is not ventilated, more than 65, the mortality, even if they're not ventilated, mortality somewhere sits around 26 to 27%. And patients who do not need mechanical ventilation in younger age group, 18 to 65, is around 19.8%. So these figures are important, especially when we are counseling in our Indian circumstances, because we do see a lot of elderly people who eventually get very sick and they need intubation and mechanical ventilation. So it is important to have some sort of these figures in mind to tell the family that the risk of dying is very, very high, especially in an elderly more than 65 who get intubated ventilator, where mortality is up to 97%. So that figure is something, it's important because this is the risk stratification. We are talking about a risk stratification in COVID. So males more vulnerable, obese males are even more vulnerable, aged males are at a much higher risk of dying when they come to ICU, and ICU mortality itself for a COVID patient hovers around 20 to 25%, and elderly it comes to around 26 to 27%, and if they get intubated, 98 is the mortality. So the length of stay median was 4.1 days for COVID patients. And again, this particular study showed diabetics had a higher mortality and a higher risk of AKI. So especially if you have elderly with diabetic, they do have a bearing on increase in the mortality. So in this particular study, they looked at whether ACE inhibitors had any role or influencing mortality. So they had three groups. So they had 189 patients who were on ACE, 268 patients who were on ARB, and there were the rest of the patients who were not on ACE. So if you see the mortality, although there was the numbers look little increased in ACE and ARB, but it was not statistically significant. So there was no bearing of patients who are on ACE inhibitor in having a detrimental influence on their outcome. So that's about the US study. Then this Italian study came, which looks at characteristics, treatment, outcome, and cause of death in invasive mechanically ventilated with COVID-19 ARDS in Milan. So here they took only the sickest of the patients who had ARDS. So they took 73 patients on ventilator. So these were sickest patients who are already on a ventilator from 20th February to 2nd April 2020. Again, you see here 83.6% of them were males. So it has a predilection to affecting more males, and obese males do even badly. And median age, even in US study you saw it was around 60. So even here you see it's 61 years. And hypertension was the commonest. If you see the Chinese study, US study, and this Italian study, the commonest comorbidity is hypertension, but it is the diabetes which tended to have a sort of a influence on adversely impacting the outcome. And this Italian study showed that 73.3% who had ARDS and were on ventilator had lymphopenia. So again, we have clearly understood NLR ratio has a very important correlation with the progression of the disease. So the lower the lymphocytes, the worse is the outcome, or the lower the lymphocytes indicates that there is a progression of the disease towards unfavorable outcome. So lymphopenia, as you see, these are a cohort of patients who are on ARDS on ventilator, which means they are a sickest of the patients. 73.3% had significant lymphopenia. And what are the factors they looked at which had a correlation with the patients landing up on ventilator? They looked at CRP. So the median CRP was 184, which means the CRP levels, the high CRP levels had a correlation with them being on a ventilator, and high D-dimer. So we are seeing this time and again. People who are coming with very high D-dimer, they tend to be a lot more sicker with needing more advanced sort of a respiratory support. So the D-dimer level was 10.1 and the median was 5. The interquartile range was 5.23 to 8. And the tidal volumes, the median they used was 6.7 ml per kg. Interquartile range was 6 to 7.5, and the median PEEP they used was 12 centimeter of water. So these are some of the observations that they made in these sick patients who were on ventilator, and 63.8% of these ARDS patients who were on ventilator underwent prone ventilation, and the 6.8% underwent ECMO. So the median follow-up was done for 19 days for these patients. And when you look at mortality, so these were patients with ARDS on ventilator. Mortality was much lesser when you look compared to the year study. It was 23.3. But don't get swayed away by this impressive mortality, because if you look at ICU, 31.5% were discharged from ICU. But see this is an important figure. 45.2% of the patients were still on a ventilator when they published this manuscript. So we do not know what was the outcome of this. So this would obviously, many would have died in this, and this would add on to this mortality. So you would still look at mortality somewhere around 50% in patients who are mechanical ventilator, minimum I would say, because there are half of these patients who are still undergoing mechanical ventilation. So this is an important slide again to look at. We are talking about risk stratification. What are the factors that predict the death in COVID? So old age had a correlation with the death. So the odds ratio was 1.12, that was statistically significant. So elderly people, and we saw in that US study that came in JAMA that more than 65, the risk of death is much higher, 97% if they get intubated and ventilated. Hypertension did have a correlation in this Italian study with mortality, and it had an odds of 6.15. And when someone is intubated, when you see trends towards early improvement in PaO2, FiO2, that had a good correlation with improved survival. So suppose you intubate and mechanically ventilate, and PaO2, FiO2 remains static or does not improve. So that has an unfavorable outcome. But if PaO2, FiO2 starts improving once you've intubated, then it may indicate to you that they have a better chances of survival. And this is a very important figure. The patients who are intubated, 75.3% developed AKI. That is also very important. 9.6% developed secondary bacteremia. So the blue curve is the survivor group and the change. So if you see a change in PaO2 by FiO2, it has a correlation with the survival as opposed to the non-survival, which is the red group. And and this is a blue one, so which have a favorable change in PaO2 FiO2 who got discharged alive, as compared to the red one who did not get discharged, where there was no improvement in the PaO2 by FiO2. So that's about the second Italian study. So this was the third article which came in JAMA 12th May 2020 by Chinese group, development and validation of a clinical risk score to predict the occurrence of critical illness in hospitalized patients with COVID. So this particular article, the hypothesis was to only look at the predictive indicators which have an influence and bearing on the outcome. So this was a Chinese study. They looked at 575 hospitals which were admitting COVID, and they sort of a statistical modeling was done by using this lasso with logistic regression to come out with a predictive risk score to identify the predictors or variables that have a bearing on mortality, and they call this as COVID gram. And the accuracy of this predictive risk score was assessed by looking at the area under curve of receiver operating characteristics. So they looked at ROC curve and tried to ascertain the predictive value. The study was done between 20th February to 17th March 2020. The endpoint they looked towards composite endpoint of critical illness, which was a combination of ICU admission, death, or patients needing mechanical. So any of this was taken as a endpoint. So it was a composite of any of these variables as an indicator of criticality of the illness, either be it ICU admission, death, or someone needing mechanical ventilation. So the background of this study was by 16th April 2020, 2 million people were affected worldwide, and this is the case fatality rate, or the global mortality of COVID at that point of time was 6.57. So today, as we are speaking on 19th September, the global fatality is hovering around 3. So which means it has significantly come down because our ability to understand the disease and act upon it has gotten much better. And this is an important figure. The critical illness mortality or ICU mortality, I told you that it is around 25%, 20 to 25. But in ICU, if they are very critically ill, the mortality can be up to 50. So these figures are important for anyone listening to this when you are counseling the family. The fact that patient is in ICU itself, mortality you are talking about 20 to 25. And if they are critically unwell in ICU needing HFNO or NIV, the mortality is hovering around 50. If they are intubated and ventilated more than 65, you are talking about mortality of 97 to 98%. So these figures are important when we counsel the family of COVID patients, especially in this day and age where you have a lot of dichotomy when we are talking to the families, because sometimes they think it's a very simple thing that everyone should be getting better. That's not the case. And the median age in this particular study was 48. As you see, the age is slowly coming down, because if you saw the Italian study, it was 60 and US study 60. But here in this particular study, which is a Chinese, the median age was 48.9. Again, here males had more predilection, 57.3 were males. 98.5% of these patients were mild symptoms. Only 1.5% were severe sort of a disease condition. But these cases, once the admission, they progressed. In 8.2%, they progressed to becoming more critical. And mortality was, overall mortality, this is a case fatality if you have to say, was 3.2%. And the commonest symptoms, like in US study, you saw in the previous Chinese study, here also fever is a commonest symptom. Cough is 70.2%, fatigue was 42.8%, and short of breath, if you saw the earlier US study and the Chinese study, 55%. Here you see dyspnea is 23.7%, but abnormal CT was present in 71.1%. And comorbidities, 25.1% had comorbidities and 16.9% had hypertension, 8.2% had diabetes, 3.7% had coronary artery disease. So this table is very important. They did a multivariate regression analysis to look at all the independent factors which have a bearing on mortality. If you saw the Italian study, it looked at age and hypertension having a good correlation with increased mortality. Here they look again, here age also remains. So whichever predictive model we look at, age becomes an important predictive risk for increase in mortality. And here they looked at obtundation. Someone comes with obtundation, the odds of them having mortality is much higher. It is 4.7. This is odds for critical ill. So the odds for critically ill in definition in this particular study was composite endpoint of coming to ICU, needing a ventilator or death. Okay. So it was 4.71, and hemoptysis had a direct correlation with increase in the criticality of the condition, and someone who's had a history of cancer, that had a bearing, direct correlation with having worse outcome, and someone coming with abnormal chest x-ray had an odds of 3.39 of having a correlation with worse outcome and comorbidities, and someone coming with short of breath or dyspnea had odds of 1.88, and this is very important. So NLR ratio of 17.1 had a good correlation in influencing bad outcome, and that was statistically significant. And LDH of 480 had a 480 and more had a good correlation with unfavorable outcome. So this we have incorporated even in our guideline, and bilirubin of 1.15. So high bilirubin also was an important indicator which had a bearing on worse or unfavorable outcome. So these are very important predictive factors that were identified in this particular study as predictors of bad outcome. So, and we increasingly see even in our practice now in September that neutrophil lymphocyte ratio has a very good linear correlation with clinical progression and clinical worsening and bad outcome. So we've had a patient who died with NLR of 100, which means he had no lymphocytes, he had zero lymphocytes. So this is very distinctly we are seeing that NLR has a very good linear correlation with the clinical worsening pattern, and these absolute values have found some relevance in our practice as well. So as you see, this is the table looking at the indices which had a bearing on bad outcome, which is NLR, LDH and bilirubin. And to that effect, they came out with this online calculator which is very easy to use. You can go to this and put in all these variables, and here you'll get the risk stratification as low risk, medium risk or high risk. So that is the website. You can go to that website and you can use this online calculator to stratify and risk stratify to which category your patient belong, whether mild, moderate or severe. So that's about all the older studies which came from the older means they came in April, May from US and China. So this was a more recent article which came in a European Respiratory Journal. This particular article came in August. So it's a comparison of severity scores for COVID-19 patients with pneumonia retrospective study. So here, this particular paper, the authors tried to see which predictive tool for community acquired pneumonia is best to apply in COVID. So we know we have various pneumonia predictive tools like pneumonia severity index, you have Curve 65, you have ADROP, you have SmartCop and Q. So they compared each one of these to see which model has a better predictability in trying to prognosticate a patient with COVID. Okay, so they used something called net reclassification improvement and integrated discriminatory improvement to come out with a model to see which one had a better predictive ability. So this particular study looked at 654 patients. It's a European study, and 133 patients had died in that, and 521 patients were discharged successfully. So they took these patients, they created this modeling by applying this net reclassification improvement and discriminatory improvement to see which model performed better on these patients to prognosticate and risk stratify the patients. And they built a area under curves. So if you look, ADROP performed the best, ADROP tool. So area under curve was 0.87, Curve 65 was 0.85, pneumonia severity was 0.84, SmartCop was 0.81, QSOFA was 0.8, and CRB 65 was 0.73. So the way the authors looked at is when someone had a predictive area under curve correlation coefficient of more than 0.85, it was excellent performance. And if someone has had 0.73, it was considered moderate if it was between zero point 0.7 to 0.85. So this was the predictive model, and they believed that A drop was the best sort of a pneumonia severity index to be applied, or the predictive model to be applied to prognosticate the COVID patients. So now the question to all my listeners is to have a brief about what A drop is, what the SmartCop is. So Curve 65, so I've just put it in a very pictorial format. Curve 65 was validated in more than 12,000 patients. So someone who has confusion, C is for confusion, U is for blooduria more than 7 millimoles, and R is respiratory rate more than 20, or you have a hypotension, systolic less than 90 and diastolic less than 60. So that is Curve 65. And SmartCop is someone who is having confusion, systolic blood pressure less than 90 get 2 points, and respiratory rate more than 30, hypoxemia, tachycardia, and low albumin and low pH. So these are the components that constitute the SmartCop modeling and the radiology. So what is A drop? So A drop was established in 2005 by Japanese people. So A stands for age, D stands for dehydration. So A stands for age, D stands for dehydration, R stands for respiratory rate or respiratory failure where saturation is less than 90, and P stands for blood pressure drop, and O stands for obtundation, confusion. So this particular tool is what you can possibly try to remember pictorially. So A drop is something that has a better ability to predict outcomes in patients with COVID, because this performed the best with the AUC of more than 0.85. Okay, so the A drop. So this is the age, dehydration, respiratory failure, and conventionally 0 to 1 score is low risk home treatment, 2 is intermediate risk hospitalization, 3 to 5 is high risk and ICU. So the mortality is 0 to 1 is 4.76%, 2 is 16, and 3 to 5 is 41.77. This is in a non-COVID sort of a situation. So A drop had a better predictive ability. And predictive accuracy was similar to Curve or PSI. So this was another article which came in again in August, prognostication and proactive planning in COVID-19. So I've just put up a global case fatality rate. So as of 18 September 2020, the global case fatality rate is 3.13%. So which is pretty high. If you look at 18 September US case fatality rate is 2.97%. So India is 1.61%. So we should possibly be happy at this stage that India seems to be performing, but there are caveats to it. See, 1 in 10 of the US patients who died were more than 80 years, and 54% of the deaths happened in patients who were more than 80 years. So you see a stark difference in the type of mortality age group between India and USA. So USA, there were very elderly patients who died. So as of 6th April 2020, because I have only taken April, the reason is Germany and Italy had peaked during that time. So the case fatality was 0.7%, and in Italy the case fatality was 10.7% in April when they had peaked. Okay. So when you look at ICU mortality from the studies done in China, it was 61.5% when it happened in Hubei. So again, you are seeing the figures. The ICU mortality ranges from 20% to 25%. But in the earlier period where China was exposed, the ICU mortality was 61.5, and the median duration of stay in ICU was 7 days. So UK looked at its ICU mortality. So with the ICNAG data, which is Intensive Care Network and Research Center, so their ICU mortality was 67% UK, and the median age of patients who died in ICU was 64.6% in Chinese study. Okay. So even this paper looks at survival after cardiac resuscitation. So they looked at 136 patients who underwent cardiac resuscitation. 30 days survival in COVID patients is 2.9%. They compared this with the non-COVID patients in the previously, pre-COVID, it was 18%, which means to say after cardiac resuscitation, the outcome in COVID patients is much worse than non-COVID patients. And favorable Glasgow outcome score, or the favorable neurological recovery, happened only in 1 in 136 patients. But in the pre-COVID, It means before the onset of COVID, in non-COVID patients, half of them had a good neurological memory. And this was the Chinese data again, which came in 2020. So, which means to say, in someone who's had a cardiac arrest or who required CPR or cardiac resuscitation, the outcome doesn't seem to be good in COVID patients. So that is what we get to gather. Okay. So, so this is the US data. So where you look at case fatality rate correlating with the age. If you look at case fatality rate at 75 to 84, you see the case fatality is 4.3 to 10.5. And so if you see, there is a linear correlation with the increasing in the age. The higher the age, there is a linear increase in the case fatality rate. So if you see, at 70, more than 85, it is 27.3. So it is a very good table which tells you there is a linear correlation to the increasing death rate, which is correlating with the increasing in the age. Okay. So now coming to last couple of slides. So we look at all the epidemiological data and we saw all the predictive variables, and there is something called clinical variables based on which we stratify the disease. So group A is mild symptomatic or asymptomatic, and group B is where they have a saturation of 90 to 94% and tachypnea, and group C is where you have respiratory rate is more than 30 and saturation is less than 90. So this is a clinical. So you looked at all the statistical epidemiological data and looked at the predictive correlates, and this is when patient presents to the hospital. These are some of the clinical attributes that we see. And when we say mild symptoms, and you have seen this picture, so there are a myriad of symptoms that they can present with, starting from headache, vomiting, and myalgia, diarrhea, and 3% have ARDS. And chest X-ray, 59% have chest X-ray, and 86% have CT findings, and 38% of the patients may have just fatigue. So these are some of the, based on the symptomology, you can risk stratify into based on the symptoms, the group A, group B, and group C. So now let's look into the CT grading. So basically what I'm trying to highlight is, from epidemiologically we try to understand what are all the variables which has a influence on the outcome, and clinically when they present to hospital, you have an ability to stratify between mild, moderate, and severe based on oxygen saturation and the respiratory rate. Then you have to look at the CT grading as well. So we look at something called CORAD score, COVID ARDS score. So as you see, CORADS 1 is there is no suspicion of COVID because CT there is normal. CORADS 2 is a low index of suspicion. So CORADS 3 is when you start getting little suspicious about possible COVID, but your ability to decipher that it is possibly COVID starts with CORADS 4 score, where you have this peripherally based ground glassing opacities and crazy path paving, crazy paving. So these are seen more in CORADS 4. So once you have a CORADS 4, it means there is a high index of suspicion of someone having COVID. But more important than CORADS is CT severity score. So this is more important. So this is obviously an expertise of radiologists. So the way they look at it is, they look at each lobe. So you have 3 lobes on the right side, 2 lobes on the left. So you look at right upper lobe and you score the involvement out of 25. So basically the maximum you score 1 out of 5. So less than 5%. So you basically score this way, and the maximum score is out of 25. In each lobe you would score out of 5. So if it is less than 5, they get a score of 1, and the maximum score is 5. So this is the way they score on each lobe. On each lobe they score on both sides, and they score it out of 25 to determine the severity of COVID involvement. So CORADS is only the first step to determine whether there is a risk of them having COVID. Once you ascertain there is possibly a risk of COVID, then you do the CT severity score based on scoring on each lobe on each side on a total cumulative score of 25. Okay, so this is a new score that has come. So you can come out with various scores, basically mixing and matching all that variables. So this is something called ABCD scoring. This scoring is more for triaging. So as you see, ABCD is, they have taken age, they have taken body aches, body temperature, contact cough, and comorbidities. So pretty much it's a jugglery of all the predictive factors that we already have spoken, and they classify this into green, yellow, and red. 0 to 3 is mild, which means they can be home quarantined and observed at home. 4 to 6 is yellow, where they are moderate and they may need some sort of an admission or some sort of a monitoring in a maybe COVID care center or designated COVID health center in Indian circumstances. So if it is red, you have a score of more than 6, then they need to be definitely be admitted into hospital. So this is called ABCD scoring. So that's pretty much what the literature is available today to try to create multiple scoring tools. So the summary of this whole talk is basically there's no one scoring tool. So whatever tool you look at, it is integrating your clinical variables based on mild, moderate, severe. Then you look at monitored variables, which is again the saturation. Then you have to look at all the investigative variables, which are all the different tests that you would do and the radiological findings. So you integrate all this to determine, what sort of a risk stratification they are in, whether they are in mild, moderate, or severe, or whether they are in green, yellow, or red zone, and then you plan your treatment. So thank you very much. So if you have any questions, you can need any more clarity, you can revisit this lecture on my website www.drpradeeprangapu.com. Thank you all.